for more on all this, I'm joined now by NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Cheung, NBC News senior White House correspondent Kelly O'Donnell, NBC News correspondent Steve Patterson, who's at the Port of Los Angeles, and CNBC senior economics reporter Steve Liesman will be with us in a moment. Brian, I want to start with you. Take us under the hood of this GDP report. Was it a good or bad report for the state of the overall economy?
Yeah, and by the way, GDP stands for gross domestic product. This is the most trusted measure of how much an economy grows. And what we saw from this report earlier this morning, which again is published by the government in the form of the Commerce Department's Bureau of Economic Analysis, showed that we had a contraction of economic activity in this country, down 0.3%. That is the first negative print that we've seen on a quarter of growth in about 3 years. So again, what is kind of underneath that figure? Well, it seems like most of the drag on economic activity was due to a surge in imports. So these are companies that essentially pull forward any sort of orders, let's say for toys that could be, put on shelves later on this year. They wanted to get ahead of those tariffs, likely ahead of January 20th. That's a big reason why we saw the negative contribution to GDP, even though consumer spending on investment, as you could see on that chart ahead of you, were indeed in the positive. So it does seem like most of the economic activity, that was really in the negative side was due to the pull forward of inventory, as opposed to more kind of core parts of economic growth, like the way that consumers spend and the way that companies invest, as well as governments spend. Again, not necessarily a red flag, but of course that negative print is catching a lot of attention, because if you get two in a row, that can, by some definitions, be what some would consider a recession game.
You know, Brian, I want to pick up on that point of consumer spending. We've been hearing over the last several days from the administration, specifically the Treasury Secretary Besant, that they're shrugging off these sagging poll numbers when it comes to the economy, because they say the data is still looking good for them, that consumer spending is still high relatively. So how much do we know whether consumer spending may have been juiced by people moving up planned purchases on iPhone, cars, for example, to front run these tariffs?
Yeah, well, look, on the import side, which we just talked about, that's companies that are basically trying to put in as much orders as they can and try to get things stateside as early as they can to get ahead of the tariffs. But on your question about whether or not consumers are doing the same, are people choosing to buy a vehicle? Are people choosing to buy a new washing machine to get ahead of steel and aluminum tariffs or auto tariffs? It's not necessarily clear based off of the data that we're seeing right now. The data still looks, by all standards, relatively okay. By some measures, the personal consumption expenditures, which is a proxy for consumption as measured by these statistics, by GDP, were below estimates. But again, they were still positive. And there's nothing necessarily about that specific side of the GDP accounting that would suggest that we are in a recession. The consumer does account for about 70% of all economic activity. So if that were to contract, that could be trouble. But we're not seeing it yet, Gabe.
Brian Cheung, thanks for walking us through that, Brian. Thank you. I want to turn now to Kelly O'Donnell at the White House. Kelly, President Trump is urging patience on the economy, as we mentioned, and downplaying the potential effects of empty store shelves. So walk us through what he's saying today.
Well, one of the things that is striking is to sort of measure how the president has been adjusting this. He certainly talked about tariffs broadly during the campaign, but as you pointed out, he did not do a lot of preparing the public for what that could look like in the real world impact. And now he's doing a bit more of it. And it was striking today to hear him talking about one particular sector of the economy, and that is toy sellers. Obviously, the Christmas holiday season is, in terms of the retail landscape, not that far off. And planning will need to be done on that. And the president seemed to reflect how the toy makers have a real issue, because so much of their product comes from China. Very different than automakers, which are a smaller volume, much higher price point, and so forth. For the toy makers, it is lots of pieces. They are typically lower cost, but very expensive to be sustaining that 145% China tariff. So what really stood out today in his very long cabinet meeting is where he hinted that American children might have to do with less in terms of presents under the tree or for birthdays or special occasions, because there would be an impact on the cost from China. Here's a portion of what the president said.
They made $1 trillion with Biden, $1 trillion, even $1.1 trillion with Biden selling us stuff. Much of it we don't need. You know, somebody said, oh, the shelves are going to be open. Well, maybe the children will have $2 instead of $30, you know, and maybe the $2 will cost a couple of bucks more.
A couple of bucks more. Well, a 145% tariff is arguably a lot more than a couple of bucks, and that, of course, is paid by the importing companies, some of whom are talking about the fact that this is a crushing level of cost for them that they had not prepared for. But trying to sort of shift the expectations for the public. Now, little children are not probably watching the cabinet meetings, but they certainly ask their parents for the gifts and the special things that they want, and moms and dads will have to adjust to higher costs. So is a doll or a toy that goes up significantly in cost due to tariffs, is that something that families will be able to sort of absorb for those special occasions coming up? That's a real tonal shift from the president saying, effectively, be prepared to do with less.
Yeah, certainly, Kelly. That was very striking from that cabinet meeting. Kelly O'Donnell, live for us outside the White House. Kelly, thank you. Now turning now to Steve Patterson, who's outside the Port of Los Angeles. Steve, what are port officials seeing right now in terms of the imports from China?
You know, Gabe, it's really simple. 145% is simply too high for some U.S. companies. So they're altogether either pausing the amount of shipments that are coming out of China or altogether halting them, which is resulting in the numbers that we're reporting now. When we spoke to port officials about a month ago, they were estimating anywhere from 10 to 20% in a reduction of cargo. Now the estimate, as you mentioned, for next week, year over year, 35%. That number is unsustainable. It translates into the month of May, where they expect ship traffic to be down about 25%. And that bleeds into every aspect of the supply chain, the suppliers, the haulers, the truckers. All of these businesses are now affected. And the smaller they are, the first they will be hit. The first wave is always the people who can handle it the least. And that's what we're seeing as far as small businesses. That will eventually translate to mid-level retailers and some of those big retailers. As you mentioned, though, the big retailers able to push through their goods first, upfront those goods when they realized that Trump had been elected and that these tariffs were going to take place. So they upfronted. But that sort of bubble has now burst, and we're starting to see the results of it. What they're hoping is that that doesn't translate to store shelves and then consumer spending, which would spiral the economy, Gabe.
And Steve, you mentioned the reaction there from businesses, small businesses, larger retailers. What, though, what's the reaction from officials at the port? What are their biggest concerns moving forward?
Yeah, jobs, Gabe. I mean, everything in the port, really in the larger community, especially here in San Pedro, is dependent upon the cargo that comes in. A lot of the hourly workers, including the truckers, again, the haulers, even the longshoremen that work the port, and there are 15,000 of them, 54%, living in the larger community about 5 miles in circumference from here, are worried about not having the hours needed to support and provide a livelihood for their families. So we're going to see a reduction in hours, of course, no doubt about that. The port CEOs are saying we're holding the phone on the possibility of maybe large-scale layoffs, but layoffs will be coming if there is no solution on the table for these tariffs. Because, again, 145% is just not sustainable enough, especially when half of the business done, both imports and exports for both of the ports here, these massive ports here in Southern California, 50% of them are business with China. It's just not a sustainable business model. Gabe?
Steve Patterson, live for us in California. Steve, thank you. I want to turn now to Steve Liesman from CNBC. Steve, what do policymakers take away from this GDP report? Because their biggest fears are a contracting economy and rising prices, and this report had warning signs for both.
Yeah, it did. So I think for most people right now, this one is not the one that is the one that we're worried about. That's coming next. We know we had this surge in imports ahead of the tariffs, and that ended up taking a big chunk out of GDP. We also know that we had American consumers were buying were buying a lot of cars and things ahead of time, again, to try to beat the tariff. So this report is sort of a wash. Next report, next quarter, might have a similar amount of noise in it because you get a snapback from all the stuff that happened in the first quarter. So what people are looking for is, well, what's going to happen in the third and fourth quarter this year? And that's where we see a pretty serious downgrade to the economy. Before President Trump took office, there was pretty good optimism. Our survey showed an expectation of 2% growth for the third and fourth quarter, or say average for the back half of the year. Now we're looking for less than 1%, kind of teetering on the negative or the zero number.
And Steve, okay, so you talked about the third and fourth fourth quarter could be problematic. Why don't you clarify the timeline there for our viewers? Because President Trump keeps urging Americans to be patient and wait and see until these tariffs actually take effect. So when will those tariffs fully take effect, and what's going to happen when they do?
Well, I'm not a mind reader, and certainly not a mind reader of this president, so I don't know the answer to that. We have been back and forth on these tariffs. There have been days when you've had tariffs on and off on the same day. And you needed as Justin Wolfers joked one day, an intraday tariff tracker to understand where these tariffs, were they on, were they off. We just yesterday got some relief for the autos. What seems to be happening is what I call cleanup in aisle 12 economic policy, is that things keep being thrown off the shelves, and then the president has to go back, and ex post, or his people have to go back and clean them up. This is the opposite of the way most economic policy tends to be made, where you might say, okay, we're going to put tariffs on the auto industry. Let's talk to the automakers and find out how they might be affected by this and see if we can mitigate the worst of a policy that we're putting together. What happens in this case is they put the policy on, they realize that it's a disaster for a certain industry, then they go ahead and they somehow ameliorate or change the policy. So I don't know. Nobody knows. There's some period of time here. They're negotiating these deals. They say they're close to deals. We haven't seen any deals. There's no progress that we can see from China, which is the big one. Some of the other ones with the Europeans, we don't know how that's going to be. So this is the uncertainty that has really frozen business. They're not firing. We haven't seen that in the data yet. But also the hiring may be muted as well.
Yeah, a lot to watch over the next coming weeks and months. Steve Liesman, senior economics reporter for CNBC. Steve, we always appreciate your expertise. Thank you. Pleasure.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.